Imagine the following. You're in a conversation with a German you have been studying for weeks and now you want to say, I had to go. But then you freeze. Was it, ich musste gegangen, ich hatte zu gehen, ich habe gehen gemusst? And just like that, the sentence dies a painful death before it's even out. The past tense of modal verbs can be really frustrating, not just because the forms change, but because what they mean slightly shifts too. So in this video, I'll show you exactly how to use the past tense of all 6 German modal verbs, avoid the most common mistakes, and sound like a real native when using them. Let's go! Tag an alle, my name is Florian and I have been a German teacher for about 10 years. 2 weeks ago, we looked at what modal verbs actually mean and what kind of vibe or attitude they bring into a sentence, and I highly recommend you to watch that video before this one. Just click on this info card right here to get straight to the first part. But now it's time to take things a step further, because knowing how to say I want to learn German is good, but knowing how to say I've always wanted to learn German is even gooder. So let's take a look at how wollen, können, müssen, dürfen, sollen and mögen behave in the past. I'll go verb by verb, explain their conjugation, and show you all the changes in grammar, modality, and meaning. Are you ready? Then let's dive in. First, some good news. The past tense, or Präteritum, of all modal verbs is regular and there are no exceptions. They still don't require zu, the third person singular is always identical to the first person singular, and you always use them in their Präteritum form, plus the infinitive at the end of the sentence. You will see what I mean in a second. Important side note here. If there are any changes from the present tense, I'll mark that new modality with a red exclamation mark. So watch out for these. Let's start off with the verb wollen and cover its past conjugation first. Ich wollte, du wolltest, sie es wollte, wir wollten, ihr wolltet, sie wollten. Its first modality is pretty straightforward and just the past counterpart of a strong desire or intention, fulfilled or unfulfilled. This is usually translated to wanted or intended to. Ich wollte schon immer Lehrer werden. I've always wanted to become a teacher. Die Personalabteilung wollte mit Ihnen reden. HR wanted to talk to you. Du wolltest mir eigentlich helfen. You actually wanted to help me. Wollte dich nicht verletzen. He didn't intend to hurt you. As in the present tense, you can use wollte as a main verb by itself. Ich wollte das nicht, I didn't want that, is absolutely possible. Number 2, personified resistance of inanimate objects, also the same as in the present. Possible translations are wouldn't or didn't want to, and you always use this modality in negative clauses, such as Der Computer wollte einfach nicht anspringen. The computer just wouldn't turn on. Es wollte nicht aufhören zu regnen. It wouldn't stop raining. Die Kopfschmerzen wollten nicht weggehen. The headache didn't want to go away. Der Stift wollte einfach nicht schreiben. The pen just wouldn't write. Number 3, a reported plan. Now, this one is new to the past tense of wollen. It describes a reported plan that should or should have happened at some point, but might never happen actually. The closest translation in English is actually the past tense of the going to future, so was going to, but sometimes wanted is still the better fit. Sie wollte morgen vorbeikommen. She was going to come by tomorrow. Die Bank wollte das Geld gestern überweisen. The bank wanted to transfer the money yesterday. Du wolltest mich eigentlich etwas fragen. You were actually going to ask me something. Das Studio wollte das Spiel bis 2024 rausbringen. The studio wanted to publish the game by 2024. The second modal verb is the past form of können, konnte. Now by just looking at the verb, you might have noticed that the umlaut ö turned into o, and this is going to be a trend with almost all modal verbs in their Präteritum form. They all lose their umlaut. Ä turns into a, ö into o, and ü into u. The rest of the conjugation stays the same though. Ich konnte, du konntest, sie es konnte, wir konnten, ihr konntet, sie konnten. The modalities conveyed by this verb are basically just the past versions of all the present ones with no significant changes. Number 1, the ability or capacity to do something. Could and was able to are both viable translations in English. Ich konnte ihre Frage nicht beantworten. I couldn't answer her question. Der Patient konnte sein Bein nicht spüren. The patient couldn't feel his leg. Sie konnte endlich den Berg besteigen. She was finally able to climb the mountain. Die Detektive konnten den Mörder finden. The detectives were able to find the murderer. Number 2, knowledge or learned ability. Here, besides could and was able to, knew how to is also a perfect translation. Sie konnte schon im Kindergarten schreiben. She already knew how to write in kindergarten. Ich konnte früher sehr hoch springen. I used to be able to jump very high. Du konntest schon immer gut kochen. You've always been able to cook very well. Meine Mutter konnte damals kein Auto fahren. My mother didn't know how to drive back then. Number 3, a possibility or opportunity. With this modality, you can swap out was able to and could to it was possible or impossible. Ich konnte gestern endlich ausschlafen. I was finally able to get a good night's rest. Er konnte einen guten Job finden. He was able to find a good job. Not because he is smart and ambitious, but rather because there were a lot of vacancies. Sie konnte nicht im Lotto gewinnen. It was impossible for her to win the lottery. Die Teilnehmer konnten keine Fragen stellen. The participants weren't able to ask any questions. Again, not because they didn't know how to or didn't have the ability, but rather because there was no time left or dedicated to questions. And the last one, number 4, an informal and direct permission or prohibition. As in the present, this modality is a softer and more colloquial version of dürfen, something like could or was allowed to in English. Früher konnte man das noch sagen. In the past you could still say that. Als Kind konnte ich lange draußen bleiben. As a child I could stay outside late. Wir konnten im Unterricht Musik hören. We could listen to music in class. Das Spiel konnte wegen des Regens nicht stattfinden. The game couldn't take place due to the rain. By the way, you can always replace konnte with durfte if the permission or prohibition is stronger, but more on that later. Let's move on to the third past modal verb, musste. As you can see, it also lost its umlaut. Ü became U. Here's the conjugation. Ich musste, du musstest, er sie es musste, wir mussten, ihr musstet, sie mussten. The first modality is another past version, which is necessity. Wir mussten einen Umweg machen. We had to take a detour. Sie musste nicht überzeugend klingen. She didn't need to sound convincing. Ich musste ihn noch einmal anrufen. I had to call him again. Die Firma musste eigentlich niemanden feuern. The company actually didn't need to fire anybody. Number 2, obligation, duty, or coercion. Here, had to fits perfectly in English since must can only be used in the present tense. Was obliged to is also possible in very tight situations. Ich musste oft früh aufstehen. I often had to get up early. Ihr Sohn musste sofort sein Zimmer aufräumen. Her son had to clean up his room immediately. Die Soldaten mussten dem Befehl folgen. The soldiers were obliged to follow the order. Die ganze Crew musste sich nach dem Flug übergeben. The whole crew had to vomit after the flight. Damn, that was a nasty example. Aber ich musste es einfach inkludieren. I just had to include it. Anyway, let's get to the next modality. Number 3, involuntary circumstance or fate. Now, this one is kind of special, and the best translations in English are, again, had to, but also bound to. So, let's take a look. Es musste ja so kommen. It was just bound to happen. Irgendwann musste es passieren. It had to happen at some point. Nach all dem Stress musste sie ja krank werden. After all that stress, she just had to get sick. Früher oder später musste er scheitern. Sooner or later, he was bound to fail. Pretty useful, especially if you talk about situations you don't really have control over. It is also okay to use that modality in the present tense. So, früher oder später muss das schief gehen. Sooner or later, that has to go wrong. But it's just not as common as in the past. Having covered that, let's get to the next modal verb, durfte. Again, no umlaut, so ich durfte, du durftest, er sie es durfte, wir durften, ihr durftet, sie durften. Like its present counterpart, it expresses a permission in positive clauses and a prohibition in negative clauses. Was allowed to or was permitted to are definitely the best options in English. Als Kind durfte sie nicht fernsehen. As a child, she wasn't allowed to watch TV. Früher durfte man in Restaurants rauchen. In the past you were allowed to smoke in restaurants. Der Schüler durfte nicht nach Hause gehen. The student was not permitted to go home. Ich durfte das schon immer machen. I've always been allowed to do that. Number 2, disaster or failure prevention. Now this one is not so much about social norms or moral boundaries, it's more about the possibility of a bad consequence if something was done differently. Thus, you can only use this modality with negation, and the perfect translation in English is actually couldn't be allowed to. Here are some examples. Das durfte einfach nicht passieren. This just couldn't be allowed to happen. Wir durften die Wette nicht verlieren. We couldn't be allowed to lose the bet. Der Prüfer durfte keinen Fehler übersehen. The instructor couldn't be allowed to overlook any mistake. Das Feuer durfte sich nicht weiter ausbreiten. The fire couldn't be allowed to spread out any further. Alright, here's the fifth modal verb in the past, sollte. First, the conjugation. Ich sollte, du solltest, sie es sollte, wir sollten, ihr solltet, sie sollten. For this verb, you can always use the translation was supposed to. It works for all modalities in German. For example, an instruction or recommendation from a third party. Du solltest dein Zimmer aufräumen. You were supposed to clean your room. Watch out though, while this is also a hypothetical recommendation in the present, something like should in English, this is not what's being meant here. It merely conveys the idea of somebody having been instructed to do something. Sollte dieses Antibiotikum nehmen. He was supposed to take this antibiotic. Sie sollte eigentlich zuerst mich fragen. She was actually supposed to ask me first. Der Junge sollte sein Spielzeug wegräumen. The boy was supposed to put away his toys. Now, sollte in all of these sentences can be translated to should in English because these two forms are identical in German, but more on that in the next video. Number 2, past expectation or norm. Die Lieferung sollte gestern ankommen. The delivery was supposed to get here yesterday. Das Feuerwerk sollte später stattfinden. The fireworks were supposed to take place later. Das Meeting heute Morgen sollte nicht länger als eine Stunde dauern. This morning's meeting wasn't supposed to take longer than 1 hour. Woher sollte ich das wissen? How was I supposed to know that? Now usually contextual clues will give you all the information you need to differentiate between was supposed to sollte and should sollte. Alright, last but not least we have mochte. Not möchte, mochte. Ich mochte, du mochtest, sie es mochte, wir mochten, ihr mochtet, sie mochten. We usually use mochte with nouns, as in, ich mochte früher keine Pilze. I didn't like mushrooms in the past. The only real modality is the past form of reluctance or resignation. Two possible translations for this one are didn't feel like doing something or just didn't want to. Ich mochte einfach nicht mehr antworten. I just didn't feel like answering anymore. Unsere Tochter mochte sich nicht verabschieden. Our daughter didn't feel like saying goodbye. Das Kind mochte seinen Teddybär nicht loslassen. The child didn't want to let go of his teddy bear. Sie mochten sich nicht entspannen. They didn't feel like relaxing. Now, this modality is much rarer than its counterpart in the present, so don't waste too much time on this. You can almost always replace mochte with wollte. Also, a very important side note here, and what I've kind of alluded to a while ago, is don't confuse mochten with möchten, would like to. That one is used to be more polite in the present tense, but I'll cover that in the next and last of my 3 videos about modal verbs. Alright, you've made it through the video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you dig this type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe to help this channel grow. In the next lesson, I'll show you exactly how to form the subjunctive of all these modal verbs, so definitely make sure to activate the bell to never miss out on a new video. Until then, have a good one and haut rein!